Hello, everyone. This is JD Calderon, and this is Indie Comics Explained. And again, today I have brought on another fantastic guest for you guys. But before we get to him, please hit like, hit subscribe, share out the video. And also, today is a little special. Today is the Indie event. Well, it's not just today. It's going on from the 10th through the 12th. There was a convention that was supposed to be booked this weekend. Didn't happen. So a bunch of podcasters are getting together. We're all promoting our separate podcasts. And it's being held through Indie. So if you haven't checked out Indie, check them out on Facebook. Awesome podcast, guys. Those guys are great. So Indie event. And I also have an Indiegogo going on for the Oswald Chronicles. So please, without further ado, let's bring on our guest, Duke. How you doing, Rob?
Good. How you doing?
All right. So this is Rob Multari. Is that correct?
Multari.
Multari. Okay. Yeah, I'm terrible at last names.
That's all right. I get it all the time. It's I just usually let it go unless I ask.
But no, I always ask. So try to get it right.
Fair enough.
So Rob, before we get on to all your current happenings, because I know you have a lot of good stuff going on. Before we get to all that, we'll get down to the original younger Rob. So when baby Rob was first looking and finding those comics, right? Because we all started there. We all started from comics. Somebody gave them to us, and we started there. But what was that book that you found that made you want to write comic books?
So, starting out, when I was real young, I found out that I'm dyslexic and have an attention deficit disorder. So, this kind of happened by accident. I got it was like this the cassette tape comic collection of 3 books. It was a Batman series, Untold Legends of Batman, and they kind of like, so at the time I loved looking at the pictures and everything. My mom then kind of thought, hey, maybe we'll use these to help him learn how to read, right? So she encouraged me to listen to the tapes while reading along with the books and kind of getting just of what the words were and what they look like. And from there it just kind of was like, all right, well, there are enough chunks that I can focus. It wasn't like a full book where I had to figure out all the words like in paragraph form or anything. So and then being able to tell in the context of the pictures, so when this was probably kindergarten, first grade era, when starting to learn how to read. And so that was my first set that I have ever gotten. From there, I picked up the Incredible Hulk during his Gray Hulk, Joe Fixit phase.
Okay, Peter David.
Yeah. I think the one that sticks out the most was when it was an Iron Man guest star, where Iron Man's like pushing him up through like the floor, and they're like fighting and everything. So that was one of the covers that I recall. From then, another one was, I think there was with Nightmare, kind of pulled him and Betty into that nightmare realm. And Despair was there too, I believe. Spider-Man is another big one that I got into. X-Men, I really heavily got into because I started to put things together that like there's this universe within, they coexisted, but it really what put that together was when they put that X-Men pilot, the Pride of the X-Men. Okay. So I remember renting that and watching it as a kid and seeing the Marvel logo on that, and then seeing it also on my Spider-Man and my Hulk comics, and thought, well, this isn't coincidence, right? So then I kind of looked into it more, and it just blew my mind. And then I found out about Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman all being in their, with being in DC's universe and all coexisting and living together, super friends. So, just that really was like, I've always been like a big crossover geek, and I'm sure a lot of people are, because that's why they, kind of beat the dead horse on those those crossover events. But I love them. Like even on TV shows, like if like they have like any kind of like connection, I get like, my wife's like, you can hear me squealing like So like that kind of stuff, intrigued me. And then, going from there, I just, would come up with my own characters, my own stories, just kind of snowballed from there.
All right, cool. So, well, apparently you've been writing for a while, right? So, but your process of writing, like, what is the process? Like, you created your current story, right? Now, what was your thought process? Actually, let's go to script. How's your thought process as far as script? Are you looking when you write a script? Are you the type that, you got a pantser and you got a plotter, right? You got someone who sits down and you write out your skeleton, and you got maybe the little string, and you're looking like a detective. You're like, all right, where's this going?
So right? Yeah.
Or are you the guy that just sits down and says, damn it, I'm just gonna do this? So, which one are you?
So it's kind of a combination. I happen to daydream and think about my stories quite often. So being I have a full-time job and I have a family, so I kind of have to write when I can. But when it comes to like getting pieces together from the beginning, a lot of it comes just like from daydreaming in my head, or just if I happen to be inspired by something, oftentimes if I see something epic, then it inspires me, it gets my mind going, and then I'll have dreams and sometimes nightmares, which I think leads to a lot of like good story fodder. And so if I'm like, let's say I'm at work, or if I'm like in the car or something, or just sitting around with the kids, or, whatever, I tend to like, if I have an idea, I hurry up and like, type it into my phone and text it to myself or email it to myself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like a quick blurb or a sentence or something that will jog my memory to go back to later and then kind of flush it out. I generally have ideas where I want to go starting out before I actually sit down. So, even before like I had a smartphone, like I used to sleep with a notepad by me in college. And like whenever I'd wake up, I'd be like, I turn the light on and hurry up and write it, and then I go to sleep. Right. And then I'd wake up the next day and be like, either wow, that was really good, or what was I drinking? So I have a lot, and that's always been like my writing process, is that I would write something in a notepad or scribe, like I was in a band too in high school and college. And even when I wrote my lyrics to like our songs, I would just like, the ideas would be basically these scattered just sentences that I would then like put together. So yeah, I basically, it's like I would just kind of piecemeal everything together with my vision. And then once I had like a first draft, that's when I go back and do a lot of like revisions and editing and be like, okay, well, this didn't make sense in context with this, or I didn't like how I wrote that, so let's kind of make it better, or so that's always been my process. And it's weird because like I've been doing that since junior high, when I really first started writing. I think it's always been like I never have a large chunk of time to sit and actually just pound away at the keyboard or write down on something. So it's always been a piecemeal thing, just putting stuff together in my spare time when I can. So, and I think that's just how I have developed my writing style. And I think too, having that in my attention deficit, like I can't sit for long periods of time and do it. You know what I mean? Like it's not that I get bored, it's that I lose focus and then move on to something else. So the way I work, and because I'm a web and graphic designer, and that I'm also a writer, and I manage the marketing and all this stuff, plus my day job, my family, like, so I kind of go in a cycle. Right. But if I have the opportunity to jump out of that cycle and like jump to somewhere in else in that, I can do that freely, because I don't get like writer's block, because I don't have, what I mean? Like I can, once I get to the point where I can't do anymore, I just jump to something else, and then it kind of reboots, I don't know. I guess that's just my weird way of doing it.
No, I got you. That's cool. So when you're writing a script for an artist, right? Obviously, are you writing, let's say, like a Marvel style type script, Or are you writing like a DC style type script where it's, panel one, scene one, page one, that sort of thing? Or are you just saying like, here's page one, here's a rough outline, go from there, and then I'll fill in the dialogue. What's your process with that?
So I more like the DC, but it's also kind of more like a movie script in a way. Right. So like while I'm visualizing I'm visualizing the scene acting out in my mind's eye, and I write the dialogue like I would imagine somebody, like I would choose an actor. For example, my Tartarus character, he's a demon who the voice in my head when I was creating him and writing his dialogue, the actor I would have picked to play his voice, if not the actual character, if it was live action and we didn't do, Anyway, it would have been Michael Clark Duncan before he passed. So as I hear his voice with a little bit of like, some kind of voice change or to it to get it more demonic sounding, but it was generally his voice as I was writing it. So when I'm writing, page one, panel one, instead of like saying in this scene they're doing this, obviously I say in this panel, so and so happens. This is a high angle shot or a low angle shot or close up or extreme, far, like landscape shot or whatever. But like, I also took a film class in college, and we had to write scripts. So I kind of combined like one of those like learn how to write a script comic books with what I learned there, and I feel like I make my scenes very film oriented, and I think it shows because a lot of people have told me that a lot of my suspense and horror scenes remind them of actually watching a horror movie, which is kind of how I intended it, which is great. I'm glad the people are saying that. So, but that's kind of how I work, is I make it very cinematic in a way that if it does get adapted, that it could be easily taken.
Fair enough. Sounds good. Now, when you're working with your artists, right? So, this is a question I can only ask artists. So, when you're working with an artist, right, and you give them a script and they start returning pages, right, to you. Now, do you find that you're getting what you want most of the time, or let's say 80 or 90% of the time? And usually, and then if you're not, what is it that you maybe see as a pattern as to what you're not getting from them?
So for the most part, I do so if I feel very strongly about how I want a panel to look or how I want a scene to play out, like I said, I do things intentionally to make it very cinematic. So I'm very, very, very particular about certain things, but then there's in this you can tell too. When I have something specific in mind, I will be like a gator, and just once I got my teeth on it, I won't let go. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, like this, like this, like this. Right. But then there's scenes where I'm like, you got artist license on this one. Go ahead. You know what I mean? Like there's the moments that I'm just like, you know what, you're good at what you do your thing. I'll just tweak it if I need to. But like I said, there's certain points that I have visions that have to be played out the way it is. And I've worked with a couple artists for my series. One being Carlos Herrera, who started Nightwolf, and then he left because he got picked up by one of those, like, it's not Magic the Gathering, but it's some other card game that he was doing. And, I can't fault him because that's real paying money, right? Right. So then I picked up Oscar, who owns Bakuman Studio, and I've worked with him and a couple of his guys that he works with. And same thing, same story with all of them. We've kind of they kind of we got a feel for each other, how we work, and and I like when they ask questions first and draw after, not draw first and then add. You know what I mean? Like I don't want them to do as much. I want to make sure they know what I want and vice versa. And I think when Carlos came back, so for issue 4, Carlos is back. He did the entire illustration, which is gorgeous. I'm excited for that to be out. But so with Carlos and I, and what's nice is he's very like, now that he's back, he's very ingrained in this. He actually gives advice, not so much towards like, oh, that my script is bad, but like he said, if we do it this way, or if I combine these two panels, I can make it more dynamic. You know what I mean? Like he's so like now ingrained in this book with me that like he's all in. You know what I mean? Like he's not just getting paid now. He is like, let's do this. Like this still will show your vision, but I think I can visually do it better this way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's your partner now. He's not just your,
yes. And I feel like
he's not just your pencil monkey.
Yes, and I love his feedback, and I love how like so I'm gonna have a spin-off series for my female werewolf. I'm gonna do an origin story for her that takes place in the 19th century in Scotland, and like I actually was intentionally I was gonna find a whole other artist to kind of make the book look different, just a whole, but like he heard the premise and he was like all in, like he was already done a cover for it, like, and
cool.
and I haven't, was like, oh, cool, and I'm like, you know what, that's spot on. I don't even, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I don't even want to hire anybody else. I'm like, I just, his art is so good.
No, it's fantastic. Yeah. All right. So, I hate it when that happens. I had a question, it disappeared. But so all right, so let's get a little bit into Nightwolf. That was a question I was going to ask you. It's kind of about Nightwolf. From beginning to end, how long is your process in writing a script?
So, all right. So with Nightwolf, this one kind of grew up with me. So it started way back when I was doing fan fiction for X-Men, and that was my first attempt with writing, was fan fiction for X-Men, because again, I was so, I loved the Jim Lee era, Chris Claremont, those two, writer and artist together, just it's just my favorite run. So while I was doing this, I found that I had a character that I wanted to introduce. I tried to make another team altogether, because I kind of like that whole like getting a team together, and since they already had so many of them, why not, like I feel like if you add more people to those teams, why not just add a whole another team, right? So after I did these fan fictions, I had sent them into Marvel, addressing Stan Lee, saying, hey, I'm your biggest fan, and hey, I wrote these, and yada, yada, yada. And I believe I was 13 at the time. And, I got a very polite rejection letter in a way, saying, hey, Stan loves to hear from his fans, and he likes to, and we have our storylines already laid out, but, hey, if anything ever comes about, yada, yada, yada. But they encouraged me to keep it up, So anyway, so what I did was I started taking some of these characters and basically making them more my own outside of the universe, and making them into my own universe. And so this character in the fan fiction didn't start out as a werewolf, but if you remember how like the X-Men had like they had like their second mutation, like how Beast turned more into like a cat creature, and
right.
and like the White Queen then had that like diamond form. So this was kind of like similar to that. Like, so his second mutation was this werewolf power. But once I decided to do things on my own, I was so like, I love werewolves. I want to do a werewolf story, right? So that's kind of where so then I changed it around to that. And we kind of, that's where I started. I think I started officially writing that when I was 16. I was on vacation. I had a journal, and I was, my sisters didn't come with my family on vacation. It was just me, my grandparents, and my mom and dad. So I was the only kid, right? Or teenager for that matter. So I kept to myself a lot, and I had my headphones and, wrote in this journal. So I had pretty much a whole vacation, and I fleshed out the first couple issues on that trip. And of course, a lot's changed since then. Once I, like I said, I got older, things changed. But like I said, I developed this. I think the final draft of issues 1 through 12 was finalized with my editor in 2013, which is when I first was looking for an artist. So, and that's when I found Carlos, and we worked through doing the character designs. That was a very long, drawn out process of creating that first season, if you will, because that's like that entire story arc is issue 1 through 12, and 12 is a double size issue because I wanted to make sure I squeezed it into 12. I don't know why, I just felt like 12 was a good number. Cool. With this new series that I'm working on with Snowpaw for her origin story, so it's taken me, between everything else, it's taken me a couple months to get a good fleshed out script for issue 1, and then like I have an idea where I want to go with, I'm going to start it out as a mini series, so it's going to be like at least a 4-issue run, and if it picks up, maybe then I'll continue on, because I have a lot of plans with her. Because it's like I have this is where Nightwolf starts, like present day. I have all that gap from the 19th century to the present day to fill in. You know what I mean? And I think if it picks up as well as I think it's going to go, I have plenty to work with.
Oh, that's good. Well, we got a question from one of the watchers. It says, "Will there be a trade for Nightwolf at some point?"
Yes, actually. So after issue 4 is printed officially and this Kickstarter is all wrapped up, I'm going to collect the first 4 issues in the trade paperback as a volume 1, and then the next 4 will be a volume 2, and then the next 4 will be a volume 3. So, and then that way, so it's 4 issues. I think are a nice good chunk of each section. That way to get out. So yes, I will have trades as I go along. But like I said, right now I got to make sure 4 gets printed, which it looks like I'm going to have that.
Yes. All right, cool. So now, your current batch of artists, how did you find them? Because like I said, it's Indie Comics Explained, so I try to get a little bit into the process, because sometimes it's difficult finding an artist. I use DeviantArt, other people use other things. So how did you find your artists?
DeviantArt. Yeah, so like I said, 2013 was when I found Carlos, but I had been looking for a while. I think I kind of started looking around 2011, found a couple people who were interested, but then when we were doing the layouts and stuff, I wasn't, it was like okay, but. I happened to say I put out one of those group ads on and several groups that I was in, and I said, "Hey, this is how much money I have. I need character designs and an issue 1 done." And then so I got a bunch of people who were basically approaching me. So at that point, I was like, "All right, well, how about this? Can you do the main character?" And then do like a test page, so there was a couple, I'd say probably there's a dozen artists that I worked with during that period leading up until I found Carlos. Just happenstance, like when you're seeing different art come into the groups and you like them and you add them to your favorites and all that. And I happened to see one of his werewolf drawings, and I instantly fell in love with that. I didn't even need him to do a test, because I looked at his entire gallery and it was just like, this is exactly what I want. I have no questions asked. So, but I thanked all the other artists for their time, and I said, hey, I found somebody that was actually fitting, and I was very upfront too, because I said, I'm like, hey, I'm trying a bunch of people were giving me samples, so don't think that this is your I'm not signing on right now. This is basically a trial. You know what I mean? Which I know for a lot of artists that's a lot of time involved. that's why I only asked for like one character and maybe a page, just to see, because there's people who are great at drawing characters, but they're not good at sequential art.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to make sure that they could do both,
Right.
Because that's what I was looking for, and and a lot of them were pretty good about everything, and then there's a couple who kind of snubbed about it, but in the end, like I said, Carlos then started. He did all the character designs, and he did like the first 6 or 7 pages of the first issue before he had to move on, and then that's when I kind of was like, okay, I need to quickly find somebody. But I wanted somebody close. Now, Oscar wasn't necessarily as close as I had wanted, but he was available. I liked his art style, and I think it had. And what I liked about Carlos is that like his art is very Western mixed with anime. It's like it's not like heavy anime or manga. It's like, but you sense that, but it's also got that American style to it as well. So I think it's a nice, perfect like hybrid. And I think Oscar was kind of similar in that manner, and I think that's why I gravitated to him. And Carlos had fleshed out all 24 pages, so I just basically was like, all right, here's the sketches. Can you take these and finish them?
Gotcha. Okay, cool. I got another question for you from the gallery. Okay. And the first question was from Alan Ellsworth. Thank you for that, Alan. And this one's from Meredith Logren, and I'm pretty sure I'm messing up her last name. Sorry, Meredith. So the question is, have you ever felt like the wolf/werewolf story was saturated, like everyone was doing it? I'm kind of feeling that way with a story I wrote 3 years ago about a pandemic. Boy.
Oh yeah, well nowadays, yeah, that might be
right.
Yeah, so I think yes, there's a lot of werewolf stories out there, but I think that mine necessarily isn't along the same lines. Like, yes, it is a werewolf, and I feel like the reason that mine is different is because I got into Werewolf the Apocalypse. It's kind of like a D&D game. Like it has books, and you kind of like start, from the beginning of their story, and then take your own.
Yeah, I remember it.
yeah. So, and I love the artwork. Like I was in high school, and I think that like really gave me my taste of what I wanted my wolves to look, and gave me that. Like I love like the weapons, so I think. And I was like, why isn't this a comic, or why isn't this a TV show? Why isn't this a video game? Why is this just a D&D game? Because there's really, it wasn't a story. It was just like a beginning, and then you had to run with it. So I was always like, why? So I was like, you know what? I want to do something, so that kind of, and I think that was, most werewolves are like, oh, well, they don't have control. They transform it, when the moon is full, and yada, yada, yada. So, again, I enjoy almost every werewolf fiction that I've, ever come across. But I also know what I like best as far as what they look like. As far, I want them to be able to think for themselves with a little bit of anger management issues. Like I growing up, I had a really bad temper. I mean, I think I still do now, but not as bad. I think I control it a little bit better. At least I'd like to think so.
It always helps.
Yeah. So, but I think that's where, like it kind of reminded me of like Wolverine, how he always had that like anger issue thing. So I wanted them to be able to have that similar, and I wanted it to be very similar to like human culture, where like there's cultures or tribes all over the world. They're different, but yet they're the same. You know what I mean? Like I wanted them to be able to live in this world, and that you can show that they were there. They're not just like the same old, guy gets bitten and turns into a werewolf. Like they're born this way. They are, they're not just cursed. They're born, and and they have they have deities that they worship, and all that kind of different stuff that they have. And I'm gonna explore more of that as I go on. Right now, it's kind of like it's starting with this, and then kind of just spread out. But yeah, so that's why I feel like mine's slightly different, is because like they can change at will. You know, it's not just waiting for a full moon. Like, yes, the moon does play. So the different phases of the moon have different things that has to do with like their tribal stance, personalities, and like power, if you will. But it's not necessarily for that. They don't have to have a full moon for them to change. You know what I mean? It's not just a once a month thing. This is an at will. You know, they control what they're doing.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Now, for myself, for that question, because I've run across similar things with writing stories, right? Where you run across something, you're like, oh man, that person is doing something very similar to mine. We all run across as writers. It always happens.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes I just think that, you know, I don't know, like there's just some weird connection that we all have, right? And some kind of weird dream cycle that we all go through, and it's just like, you know, we're all connected, and we all think of the same crap at the same time for some reason.
Right. But we all put our different take on it.
Right. Also, what I do is I put this stuff away for a year, and I'm like, come back to it then. That stuff will be gone, and I can come back to it.
Right. Well, my thought, like I said, it's like having, like, you know, werewolves obviously has been around, like that type of character has been around forever. Vampires have been around forever. You know, like in general, you're going to have a lot of similarities. I don't think that should deter anybody, especially if you're using, you know, characters that are, you know, open domain, really. It's just a starting point, and you have your own mind, you have your own story. Write it out. You know, it may be similar, but it's also different enough that it's yours. You know what I mean? And if people enjoy it, you know, that obviously people enjoy werewolves, people enjoy vampires, people enjoy, you know, zombies. I mean, look at how many different zombie you know, there's so many. But The Walking Dead took off because it had its own spin on that type of character. You know what I mean? And I think that it wasn't just focused on zombies. It was also like, you know, the drama around the people surviving it, not just for a night, for an hour and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having similar characters, similar ideas, I don't think is something that should deter people. I think you have your own version of it. If it's similar, I mean, obviously, if it's exactly the same, then there's something wrong. You know what I mean? Somebody somewhere is stealing something. But if you have your own idea, your own thoughts, your own version of it, tell it. Tell that story. Tell your story.
Yep. My feeling is exactly. Now, so let's talk. Well, we've already been talking about Nightwolf. So, I mean, let everybody know, because, I mean, you have a Kickstarter currently running, right? So how's that going? And, like, how do you think here's something somebody said I should ask yesterday. So how is that going? And how do you think, like, everything's going with you as far as, like, the pandemic? You know, like how do you think, like, you know, everything's affected, like, Kickstarter and online businesses and your business for that matter?
So with my Kickstarter, actually has been doing very well. I can't. I'm shocked at how well it's doing. My last one did well, but this one has already surpassed. I'm already over $1,000 where I was on my last one, and I still have 4 days left, which I'm very thankful for my backers, which I like to refer to as my wolf pack. And so I like, you know, my last one, I think I was at 217 pack members. Now I am 8 away from 300.
Nice.
So I am, you know, I think from my last experience to this, I've grown in the last 6-7 months. You know, not only an experience with running a Kickstarter, but also just in general, like managing and promoting it. And I think that's kind of what caters to partially why I think it's better. Also, I think that the pandemic did kind of, there's not as many Kickstarters that are out there as there was like way back. And like I said, when I put my first one out, well, not my first one, but my last one, it was in October and it ran through November. Now, I mean, there was a, you know, a million of them out there.
Right.
And I think now, you know, at this point, like it's picking up again, but I still think there's not as many people as there was at the time. I think a lot of people have either pushed off or they're waiting until this ends, or, you know, But for me personally, so my job, my full-time job, I work as an email marketing website graphic designer for an online retailer. So I haven't been shut down, but I've been working from home. So I haven't had to drive 45 minutes to work and back. So that's saved me almost, an hour and a half, 2 hours of my life not having to be in the car,
Right.
Which has helped with this stuff. And the way I do stuff with my Lone Wolf comics, everything I do with my freelance design and my comics is separate from my family life. My family life is sustained by my full-time job. And luckily for me that, when it first happened and we were working from home, we went down to 32 hours instead of 40 hours a week. So, which is fine. I mean, I was still happy to even be able to work, you know what I mean? Because I'm kind of a workaholic, if you couldn't tell.
Right, yeah.
So I think it would drive me nuts not to. I think those Fridays that I wasn't working, it was driving me nuts. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would love spending the extra time with my kids, but I was also helping with their homeschooling and stuff. And all this Common Core, I was like,
right.
I'd be like, can I go back to work? I'll do it for free.
I would say, here's a calculator.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but yeah. So that luckily sustained my life, as well as my wife's. My wife is a therapist, so she was able to do things remotely like this. Like they kind of forced them to do that because, people obviously need to talk about losing jobs and stuff like that, or being laid off in general, or being worried about the pandemic. So she was busier than ever, which thankfully for us, we didn't get hit personally, which, again, I can't, it's very thankful. And I wish that everybody else was in that same situation. And I know that there isn't, but I do hope that things for them are getting better at this point, and that they've been able to get those government, stimulus and the PP, whatever the payments, for the people who need them. And then, so as far as Lone Wolf Comics went, I made most of my money at cons. So Comic Cons were my big money makers and my big marketing, right? So I would build my email list, I would talk to people, sell my books there, and grow my email list by the hundreds there. So I only had one con this year, and that was right before the lockdown. And that was in Cleveland at the Wizard World. It was literally the week before they were like, okay, now you can't leave your house anymore.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. So this actually was supposed to be my most scheduled Comic-Con season. And so far all of them have been postponed to next year, except for the one in Erie, PA, in September, which it's probably going to be, and then the Baltimore Comic-Con in October, which is probably going to be as well. But they're still hanging on, I guess. Right. But I don't hold out a lot of trust for it. So I'm just going to assume that this whole year is just going to be a wash on that. So I had to think more along the lines of, okay, well, what can I do as far as online stuff? And I thought, well, I was already planning on doing a Kickstarter again 6 months or whatever after the last one. I happened to have enough money from a freelance job to pay my artist, and I thought, okay, this is around so when I finished my last Kickstarter in November, December, and was fulfilling, I reached out to Carlos, just happenstance. And I was like, hey, let's, what would it take to get you back on board? I'm like, do you have free time? I'll pay you, And he just happened to be, he has his full-time job, but he still has time. He had time for me. And he missed the project. He said he loved it, so he wanted to get back into it, which, So he and I, from the from this whole thing, pretty much he started, I think, working on it officially in March, and just it's from March to I think just until like a month ago he finished up, and then and as the pages were coming out, I was handing them to our colorist Gat Melvin. So as it was like, okay, your page is done. Here you go, and then okay, you're done now. I'm gonna let her. So so we, instead of focusing on what I could do to make money for Lone Wolf, I just focused more on getting this done so we could get the Kickstarter up and running as soon as possible. And I saw a lot of my our creator friends out there doing really well, like in March, April, and May, and I'm like, this is unheard of. Like, how, like, because I was very skeptical at first too. Like, I was like, oh well, I was planning on launching, so what am I gonna do? And then, like I said, I saw all these success stories, and like people, and I'm thinking about it, makes sense because TV shows are winding down, movies aren't being, people can't go to the movies anymore, so, and new ones aren't being produced because they're being on hold. I'm still waiting for the last season finale of Walking Dead to air, So like, yeah, there's all these streaming things still, but like in general, like you can't go to the movies, you can't. So once all if you've been caught up on everything, what do? You pick up a book, because people can, an individual can still put out a book, or an artist can put out a comic, you know what I mean? Like without having to go to a theater, without having to go to, so I think that's why, like online, obviously retail, people couldn't go anywhere, so they were buying stuff. People always joke, they're like, oh, well, if I think my Amazon delivery guy must think I'm dead if I didn't get a package today,
Yeah.
So like there's that whole, I think, mindset that like people still want to be entertained, especially if they're stuck in their house. And and now it's like, people are out, but they're still like not there. There's still that stigma that like, okay, well, it's still there, so I don't want to go too far out,
right,
or go out for too long. And so, I think there's that gap of entertainment that needs to be had. And I think, like people have been saying how the comic business is hurting from this, but I think the ones who know how to adapt and are doing more online things, and I give credit to the retailers who are doing their online, sales, doing like, showing the covers and talking about the books. I think Jen King does a really good job with hers, and I've watched her a couple times, but yeah, I mean, I think that's, for me, again, because I had something to sustain my family and not necessarily needed to pump money into Lone Wolf, because I kind of had already done freelance work and had enough saved for the artists, that I didn't have to worry. But had I not had that money already, built up, so like, let's say if I had to start saving up money right when this pandemic happened, I probably wouldn't be able to run this Kickstarter now and have this book done. Because right now the book is 100% done. It's ready to go to the printer. It just, right now, I'm just waiting for the the Kickstarter in so I can pay the printer.
Gotcha. Yeah. Alan Ellsworth says, I'm in Erie, no news yet.
Okay, well,
he hasn't heard anything yet. So.
Well, hopefully, Alan, I'll be able to see you in September.
Yeah, really. See someone.
Yeah, actually, I need to. They sent me last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, that I need. They sent me the agreement that I had, the official, that they send right before. So I'm assuming they're still planning, but
yeah,
right now they're closing things in Pittsburgh and across the border from me in Ohio. So I don't know what's going on.
Right. So you said you letter your own book, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right, because I letter my books. So, well, I letter one of them. I letter the Oswald Chronicles, my wife, the book she illustrates, she letters. Mm-hmm. So now your process for lettering. Are you lettering in Photoshop or Illustrator?
In design.
In design. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
so actually, it's a combination. InDesign is where I put the book together completely,
Mhm.
and if so, in most of like the word bubbles come from Illustrator, and I copy and paste them in there, and then the text obviously is through InDesign. But if I need like really stylistic looking things, I'll either do it in Illustrator or Photoshop. For example, when I did. Okay, so when Sean Forney did the X-Men homage cover, that I made the logo look like it was an X-Men logo.
Right.
That was a combination of Illustrator and Photoshop to make it work with his cover, to make it, fit into like where the light is around the X, and make, I had to do a little, maneuvering there with Photoshop, so copied that from Illustrator into Photoshop, and then just save that as a TIFF, and then put it in InDesign, and boom, there it is. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Now, do you find yourself when you're actually like lettering the book, do you find yourself doing edits as you're working?
Yeah. Actually, I think that I like lettering for that very reason. And I think there's some things that either because the last my editor looked at him last in 2013. I think some things like slang or certain things have shifted. Or when I read that again, I was like, that actually doesn't make as much sense. You know what I mean? Like, especially when you're into it. Or I also would really, if like say the artist. So with this one, this happened a couple times. Because Carlos had suggested certain changes, some of the words either didn't fit, or I had to condense sentences a little bit, or there was something that he drew that I thought, I wanted to kind of cater to that.
Right.
So yes, there were slight changes, but not a lot. But I do like being able to do that, and I think it improves the story once it's on the page. Because I feel like if I were just to copy and paste, I feel like it would lose something in translation with, how some of the art is. And I want to make sure that they speak to each other as well as to the reader.
Right. Gotcha. Okay, cool. All right, well, we've been at this for a little bit, so we're almost done, but we're not done just yet, right? So I got a few more questions for you. But before we get to that, please let everybody know where they can find your work, where they can find you, find your Kickstarter.
All right, so I am at lonewolfcomics.com is my website. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at lonewolfcomics is the at sign for all that. So you can just go to at lonewolfcomics on all three of those, and you can the short link for the Kickstarter is lonewolfcomics.com/Nightwolf, all one word. That'll redirect you to that long Kickstarter generated URL. And I'm on Facebook quite often. You probably seen my barrage of promos for this current Kickstarter.
No, that's cool. That's cool. Got it. You got to do it. Got to get it done.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're gonna get on to some of my goofy questions. Right? You may have heard a few of these. Okay, we'll start with this. Well, this one I ask everybody. So for your book, Lone Wolf, if you had the choice of any artist, any comic artist, living or dead, and you didn't have to worry about budget, who would you get to draw a cover for you?
Joe Madureira.
Okay.
I love Joe Mad. Matter of fact, Battle Chasers was one of my favorite series. I was so disappointed that he didn't finish it. But he draws himself a mean werewolf too, and I liked his run of Uncanny X-Men. Actually, there was a period where I took a break from collecting. I think from when I was probably when I turned 16. I think I wasn't collecting as much because I was active in sports and chasing girls. But yeah, so when I got then his run on Uncanny X-Men is actually I think what got me back into it.
Okay, cool. Joe Mad, yes,
Love Joe Mad.
Joe Mad, awesome. Now, if you got the call up from the big companies, you got the golden ticket, and they say, "Hey, listen, Rob," and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be Marvel. It doesn't have to be DC. It could be something else. It could be, I had one person point out they wanted to do an adaptation of a novel, so I thought that was pretty cool. So, but if they called you up and they said, "Rob, you got your pick of the litter. Which book or title or series would you pick to write?"
So if it wasn't one of mine, I would definitely have to. I would have to take either. It would have to be either Wolverine or X-Men. If it was Marvel, it'd be definitely a Wolverine or X-Men title, and Wolverine had to be involved. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I know he's not dead anymore, but if he was still dead at the time, I was bringing him back. You know what I mean?
No, I got you.
If it was DC, I would definitely pick Batman.
Batman, okay. Fair enough. All right, cool. All right, man, we're almost there, but we're not there just yet. All right, I got a few comparatives for you. All right, well, like I said, I'll softball you with the same questions I ask everybody. So we'll start nice and easy.
Fair enough.
All right, you kind of already answered this question: Captain America or Batman?
Oh, Batman.
Yeah, see.
Don't get me wrong. I love Cap. He's one of my top favorite Avengers. But when it comes to like the Avengers and Batman, I mean, I take Avengers over Justice League. Don't get me wrong. But if Batman were to jump ship from DC to Marvel, I would be in heaven.
Gotcha. Godzilla or Gamera?
Ooh, Godzilla.
Okay. Byrne or Perez?
Perez.
Okay. Perez wins that one a lot. Perez just wins that one so much.
I mean, they're both good.
No, they're both excellent. See, I asked the question because it's funny because when I was growing up, those two, that was Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane. Those are the two guys of their day.
Yeah.
And I would definitely say John Byrne was on the lead of that.
Yeah.
For the longest time.
Yeah.
And it's just funny to see how that's flipped.
Yeah. Yeah. And then don't get me wrong. I love John Byrne, and obviously, I picked his homage for Sean to do. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Love him. Just, I just think something about Perez is just little.
I got you, man. I got you. Stan Lee or Jack Kirby?
Oh, that hurts. Oh man, because I love Stan and I love Jack, but you know what? And I love them together as a team, but I know that they had their issues. But I gotta go with Kirby. Don't get me wrong, I love Stan Lee. He's one of my idols. And I actually, I got to meet him twice. But I think just Jack, there's something, I love. He reminds me of my grandpa just looking at him. Right. But his art style, and like he took basically the Marvel way and made it his own. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, I got it. Well, I think he is the Marvel way. Right.
Yep.
Bram Stoker or Mary Shelley?
I love Dracula, but I think I'd have to go with Mary Shelley because I like the way. I mean, I give Bram Stoker credit for how Dracula's written out like a journal or like entries, but there always was a lot of gaps in between them that I know you had to have your imagination to kind of fill those gaps.
Yeah.
But I think it felt too much like a documentary to me. And I think what I liked about Mary Shelley is that with Frankenstein, that like you could feel the monster's pain. You know what I mean? Like you like if you and not just like how the universal version of him was like, like you actually, with the Frankenstein monster, there was a lot to him, a lot more, and she was very articulate about how she wrote that. So I'd have to go with her.
All right. Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead?
Man, you think about these questions, don't you? You really want to pull the heartstrings. Oh, I mean, Dawn of the Dead again is being it for what it was, the beginning of a very strong era. But I have been such a and don't get me wrong, I never really was a big zombie fan until The Walking Dead. So I have to go with The Walking Dead because my wife, who I call a closet nerd, because she's not, she's very prissy. She's not into comics or anything, but she is in The Walking Dead. She introduced me to that. She introduced me to a bunch of shows because when I didn't watch a lot of TV out of college because I was too busy doing my stuff and working and stuff. But when I first started dating my wife, we'd actually sit down and there wasn't a kids cartoon because my kids would always watch, they basically roll the TV when they're awake, right? But in the evenings I actually got to sit down and watch something with my wife, and she introduced me to Walking Dead, True Blood, a bunch of the Game of Thrones. Never watched it until my wife, So again, back to your question, I'd say Walking Dead because it actually gave me a new appreciation for the zombie genre.
All right, cool. Fair enough. We'll do a couple more of these and then we'll wrap up. Let's see. Sometimes I feel this question is unfair, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Tim Vigil or Richard Corbin? And I'm trusting that you know both artists.
Yeah. Richard
Corbin. Okay. Most people go with Richard Corbin. I mean, I find it unfair. It's sometimes.
I had to think about it too. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're not familiar with Faust.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not familiar with Faust, it kind of falls off because he does if you see him in shows, he does sketch. He just doesn't. He hasn't been doing much commercial work. He doesn't do much in the way of, comic work these days.
Yeah.
All right.
I haven't seen anything from him recently.
All right. Well, we'll end it with this one. Bernie Wrightson or Barry Windsor Smith?
Barry Windsor Smith.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. Now, why do you pick him?
Now, if it's who I'm thinking it is, actually I have to look this up because I think I might actually be thinking of the wrong person. Hold on. Sorry.
That's all right. What book were you thinking of?
I was actually thinking.
Well, no, he did your Wolverine book.
Yes,
he did. He did the origin where Wolverine has the big thing on his head and he's running around naked.
Yes, that's that.
Yeah, that's Barry Windsor Smith.
That's who I was thinking of. But then, I also I for some reason in my head was thinking Little Nemo too. So I was getting because I.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That name sounds kind of similar. Yes,
Yeah.
Wolverine with Weapon X, definitely.
Yeah, it's Weapon X. Yes.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I have that original, that Toy Biz figure.
Mm-hmm.
I have him sitting on my shelf over there with the big old helmet.
No, this is an awesome book. Barry Windsor Smith's incredible. I asked the question because a lot of people usually pick Bernie Wrightson.
Really?
Yeah, Bernie. I don't know how familiar. I don't know how familiar you are with Bernie's work. Bernie's incredible.
Yeah, it but I think what was different about that Weapon X run, it was different. It was very detailed too. It was very graphic and it just what I mean. It was very. It just that it was a very haunting picture of him. You know what I mean? And I know it's supposed to be,
right?
But it's just one of those they made him look like he was tortured, but unfazed. You know what I mean? And I had to give him credit for that.
Well, he is Wolverine after all.
Exactly. Right. But I mean, he went through so much mental trauma. I mean, come on, the poor dude.
Exactly.
And he didn't have a pain factor.
True. This is true. All right. Well, Rob, we made it. We made it to the end. All right. So do me a favor, or do the fans a favor. One more time, let everybody know where they can find your work.
All right. Again, lonewolfcomics.com. at Lone Wolf Comics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can find us on Kickstarter for the current series. You can pick up issues of Nightwolf 1 through 4. So go to lonewolfcomics.com/Nightwolf, all one word, and that'll take you to the Kickstarter page.
Cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Please like, subscribe. And the next show on the indie event, go check out Demon Phil with Comics and More. And go check those guys out because that's another awesome show. Thank you so much, Rob. I'll be talking to you soon. I would wish you luck on the Kickstarter, but you already got it. Fantastic.
You.
Congratulations, man. And please, everybody, go check out his Kickstarter. Go buy some awesome books. My wife bought your books, so she's got them, so I'm gonna get them.
You're gonna be able to enjoy them.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, I'm gonna steal them from her. All right. So guys, don't tell her. So guys, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.